Today on Callahan's Garage, it's red, it's rare, it's definitely rusty, it's not a Corvair.
Hey, I'm Callahan. Welcome to Callahan's Garage.
Alright folks, welcome back to Callahan's Garage. My name is Callahan, and today we are dipping our toes into the world of weird, obscure, rare Volkswagen stuff, So those of you that have spent any time around me that know anything about me know that I'm a huge air-cooled nerd. It's just the way it is. I worked at an air-cooled shop for years and years. I've owned, over 30 air-cooled cars at this point. And this has been a dream car of mine for as long as I've been into this stuff. And fortunately, I had the opportunity to locate one of these cars and pick it up about, sometime last fall. And I've kind of been messing with it a little bit since then. If you've been around the channel at all, you've kind of seen this thing in the background. I've mentioned it a few times, but today we're going to finally start working on it. So what the heck is this thing? So this is my 1964 Volkswagen Type 34 Razor, aka Type 34 Razor Gia, Type 3 Gia, whatever you want to call it. Basically it's a Type 3 chassis car, body by Carmen, European market, super rare, super obscure car. It's not something you really see around. I've been into this air-cooled stuff for well over a decade now. I've only seen, I think, like 3 of these cars in person, so it's a European market car, very low production numbers, there's very few of them stateside. It's not something that you see every day. So we're going to try to get this thing ready for a big car show that is in a week. So we got a lot of work to do. Let's jump into this thing. All right, so I've already done, about a day's worth of disassembly on this thing to kind of get it ready for all the work that we're going to do. And we've got a handful of jobs that we're going to try to knock out here in a relatively short period of time. So I've got the engine out, I've got the front end out, I've got most of the brakes disassembled. So we need to put a clutch in this thing. We've got a few oil leaks we need to fix. Other than that, the engine runs pretty well, no major issues there. The car, as of a week ago, the car ran and drove, pretty reliably, no major issues. It functioned as it needed to. But we're going to put 4-wheel disc brakes all the way around it. We've got new wheels and tires that we're going to put on here. We've got a Type 1 conversion front end so we can get this thing sitting down where we want it. And we're doing all of this in preparation to take to a big event next weekend. So it's currently Wednesday. So next Thursday morning, we're driving up to Helen, Georgia for Alpine Volks Fair. It's one of the biggest Volkswagen events in this part of the country. So there's meets all day, Thursday, Friday, big main event on Saturday. It's just a big long weekend full of community and all different types of Volkswagens and, hanging out. And it's just a great time. We love going up to this event every year. And I'm desperately hoping that I'm going to be able to take this thing up there. So we'll see how it goes. All right, so my front end is supposed to get delivered today. I've got all my brake stuff here, kind of laid out, sorting through everything. We're going to start jumping into this thing. So the game plan is to get the suspension and all the brakes and the wheels and tires and everything done before we do the engine work. The engine stuff will be quick and easy. I'm not really worried about that. But I've got to get all this other stuff done so the car will function once we get the engine back into it. But we ran into our first hiccup. I've got a really nice Wilwood disc set up from Vintage V-Dubs out in California. But unfortunately, they sent me the wrong rotor. So I ordered some 4-lug rotors that we're going to re-drill to 4x100. They sent me 5-lug rotors. So I'm kind of playing phone tag with them right now, trying to get this sorted out. But we need those 4-lug rotors because we're going to re-drill them to 4x100 because we're going to put a set of RML snowflakes on this thing. So we got us a brand new set of 15x7 RML snowflakes. Obviously I had to get these when they announced the pre-order. So we got these. I think they're going to fit just right on the Razor, but we got to get all these brake stuff on here so we can make that happen. And then for the rear, we've got our trusty, tried and true 4-lug empty disc brake kits. So I'm going to get the rear brakes torn down the rest of the way. We're going to throw this kit together, and then we can mock up a wheel and see how this stuff is actually going to fit. Okay, so we got our caliper bracket and our bearing cap and everything back on here. Got plenty of sealant on this thing so it's not going to leak. You know, the last thing you want on something like this is we got gear oil slinging all of inside of here, getting the inside of our wheel and stuff all nasty. So make sure you get that sealed up. So now we can throw our hub up on here. And we can stick the wheel up on here. I'm putting the cart way ahead of the horse here. You know, we're still waiting on our spring plate. I still got to re-drill my hub and mount my calipers and everything, but I just got to see how the wheel looks up in here. Oh yeah, that'll do. Alright, so we pretty much got the rear end wrapped up. UPS finally showed up with all of our suspension goodies. So from Valley Auto Works suspension, you know, Sam is absolutely the man if you need any of this stuff. So for the rear, we got extended, notched, adjustable spring plates to really get the rear end dialed in nicely on this thing. For the front, we got the Type 1 from Conversion Beam. I got some paint drying on that thing right now, so first thing in the morning, we'll get the beam in. We'll start getting the front end put together. Alright, so day 2 on the razor. So it is now Thursday, and this time next week we will be gone to Helen. So we still got a lot of work to do. Yesterday we got the rear suspension pretty much wrapped up. I also got our brake rotor issue sorted out, and we have the new correct rotors on the way. So as soon as those get here, we'll be able to re-drill all of our rotors to 4x100 like we need. But today, I'm going to start getting the front suspension together. So last night, I got my new Type 1 conversion front end. I got some paint on it, just so it doesn't rust, really. I'm going to start throwing it in, and we'll start getting the front end together. All right, so we got our beam thrown up in here. And like I said before, this is a Type 1 conversion beam. So, you know, our Type 3 front end is a little different than, you know, like the standard Beetle and Carmagia stuff. So basically this just converts us to that Beetle and Carmagia style running gear. So we get the trailing arms, we get our spring packs, we get our drop spindles and everything like we would normally have in a Beetle. And basically the biggest benefit to this is just getting us, you know, more ride height adjustment. You know, we can get the car a lot lower with the Type 1 setup than we ever would think about getting with the Type 3 stuff. So we got this up in here. Before I do the final install on here, you can see our OEM Type 3 frame horn hangs down a lot lower than our new beam is. So basically what we need to do, we need to chop the bottom of this off. I'm going to cap it up, get that welded, and once we get that, we'll be able to do the final install on our front end. Alright, so got me a couple little cap pieces cut out. We're just going to weld these onto the bottom of here. We'll weld it all the way around, and this is like 3/16 thick plate. So, you know, that'll give us nice protection when this thing's bouncing off the ground down the road, because make no mistake, this car is going to be low. Alright, so we got our frame head sections capped off and trimmed up and everything. I got the final install done on our front end here. So next thing, we're going to get our steering box. We're going to get it cleaned up and installed. We're going to get our trailing arms cleaned up and installed. Get most of our steering together, and we'll keep rocking and rolling. Alright, so day 3. We are back out here. I've got all my steering components cleaned up. I didn't get quite as much done as I wanted to yesterday. Had some errands to run, some running around to do. Got me some new specs. But we're ready to start putting some stuff back together. So I got my trailer arms all cleaned up. I got my steering box all cleaned up. We've also got brand new narrowed tie rods to match up with our narrowed front end. It is narrowed 2 inches. I don't know if I mentioned that before. So our front end is narrowed 2 inches. That's going to help us fitting our 7-inch wide wheels. So we got a new steering damper. We got a new steering coupler. So we're going to start throwing all this front end stuff together. We are still waiting on our new drop spindles and link pins and everything to get here. So this is pretty much all we're going to be able to get done on the front end. And hopefully that stuff shows up soon. But I did also manage to get all our tires mounted up last night. My buddy's got a tire machine at home, so we ran over there last night, got everything mounted up. So on the fronts, we've got a nice 165/45, should give us a nice short sidewall, give us plenty of steering clearance and everything on the front end so we can keep it nice and low. On the rear, we've got a 195/65, so plenty of sidewall height. It's going to keep our highway RPMs, right where we want it. That's one of the biggest pet peeves I have with the air-cooled stuff is, everybody puts a little bitty short tire on the back so they can get it lower. But we can still go low with a healthy size tire and keep our highway RPMs up. If I see a car with a short tire on the back, that just tells me they're not driving it because these cars are already slow on the highway. The last thing we want is to go cutting our final drive ratio down with a little bitty short tire. Alright, so I think we've hit a stopping point on our suspension. We got all the steering and everything hooked up. We got our tie rods in. We got our steering damper hooked up. Everything good to go up here. Like I said, we're waiting on the spindles before we can finish hooking up the steering. Our new rotors should be here tomorrow. Then we can take our rotors and get re-drilled. Then we can finish up the brakes and get the wheels and tires on. So now we'll jump over. We'll knock out some of this engine stuff kind of while we're waiting on parts to get everything else finished up. Alright, so we've got the engine on the table up here. I went ahead and pulled this thing out a few days ago. I knew we had a couple things to address on here before I try to drive the car any distance. Primarily the clutch. The clutch on this thing is just absolutely smoked. Especially like high gear, under load, like that just slips and slips and slips. It's like totally undrivable once you get some heat in it. But it also has a rear main seal leak, so the clutch may just be totally oil soaked or it may be totally wasted. We're going to yank that off and figure it out. We're going to address a couple of other oil leaks while we're here. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do a compression test on this thing. I basically have no knowledge of the status of this engine. I was just told it's a good running engine. You know how that goes. It runs okay. I went ahead and, it's got a 009. It's got new ignition on it. I went ahead and put the Weber 34s on here with the upgraded linkage. So it runs okay, but I've got a little sneaking suspicion that it may be a little low on compression. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and check that out, see kind of what the health of the engine is, and then we'll get the clutch on here and get it stuck back in. Yeah, it's really not worn down at all, but this thing is totally soaked with oil. Like that's our problem, which is good because that means our flywheel looks really good. We'll just get all this cleaned up. We'll throw a new rear main seal in there. I've got the new clutch. We'll get slapped in and we'll be good to go back here. All right, so I got my little run stand set up here. It's just an old bolt bell housing. My starter hooked up, got my jumper cables down to a battery. We can jump our starter with a screwdriver right here. Got my compression tester hooked up. So I got this thing on number 3 right now. So let's turn it over and see what the damage is. See if my mood's about to drastically change. Yeah, so it's right about 95 PSI, which is okay. You know, I'd like to see over 100, but 95 is doable. Well, folks, I'm currently reevaluating my whole situation right now. So my suspicions were confirmed. So number 1, number 2, and number 3, we've got 90 to 95 PSI, which is totally fine. However, number 4, I tested it 3 or 4 times, and we're getting like max 40 PSI in that hole. So I don't know if we got like a bad valve seat or, you know, just like a smoked out ring or whatever. But I'm definitely not going to try to drive this thing an hour and a half up to Helen anymore. So, I am still going to jam and get this thing done and get it together and functional. But I think if we have time, what I may do is put a brake controller on the Cayenne and then tow the Razor with the Cayenne up to Helen. Which I wanted to have the Cayenne up there anyway so we could do like the trail ride and everything. So we'll see how it goes. Alright, so we got our rear main seal swapped out. The seal that I pulled out looked perfectly fine. You know, there's no reason that should have been leaking. But went ahead and we had a new seal, swapped it anyway. So, Volkswagen lesson, pro tip. There is an O-ring in the flywheel. So on the crank side of the flywheel, there is an O-ring that sits in here. You have to replace that O-ring when you do the rear main seal. If you don't replace it, like this person didn't, it will still leak and it will appear to be the rear main seal leaking, but it's this O-ring. It'll still drip out of the bell housing, it'll soak your clutch just like this one did. You gotta replace this O-ring when you do your rear main seal. Look at this. This O-ring is so old and so hard that it's breaking coming out. This is ridiculous. Don't do this. Look at how old this thing is. Literally just cracking apart. And I bought this car from an air-cooled shop. They should know better. Alright, so next thing we're going to do, I'm going to pull the heater boxes off of this thing. So our little donut gaskets on our heater boxes are just leaking like crazy. You know, as they always do on these cars. So I'm going to pull I'm going to pull both of the heater boxes off. Hopefully I'll be able to just replace those gaskets. If the heater boxes are a little too rusted out and it's not going to seal up, I also have a set of J-tubes we'll throw on there instead. But hopefully the heater boxes will be usable because I also don't have an exhaust tip for this thing. You know, Type 3 exhaust tips are super weird. So I'm hoping I'll be able to scavenge one of these J-pipes and make an exhaust tip really quick instead of having to use them on here. So we'll yank these heater boxes off and see what they look like. Alright, so our heater boxes seem to be in good shape. This one's actually already had one of the little repair pieces put on it. So hopefully these will seal back up. But, you know, this is one of those jobs. You can replace these donut gaskets 5 times in a row and they'll leak every time. So hopefully they seal up and the car doesn't sound so bad anymore. Got us a fresh gasket for the back as well. So we'll get this bolted back up, and now we can use one of our old J-tubes to make us an exhaust tip and get all this exhaust out from under the car. All right, so we got our exhaust wrapped up and back on. We got a couple more things we're gonna do, but we'll do that after we get the motor back in the car. So in the morning, we'll come out here, I'll throw the motor back in, and then we'll start wrapping everything up with this. Also, because I know somebody's wondering, I've got these handy little Sprite cans over here blocking off the ends of my fan shroud. So originally, there would have been an elbow that came off of this fan shroud right here and kind of looped around back into our heater box here. I'm missing those pieces all together, and our heat isn't hooked up in the car anyway. So we need something to, you know, block off all that extra air from just dumping out the fan shroud. So with this blocked off, that keeps our air going, you know, onto the motor where we want it. So we just got one of those on each side, no big deal. Well, we got the engine back in. Seems to be running okay, you know. Runs better than you would think it would with the low compression in one cylinder, but seems to be fine. I got a couple little things to button up. I got to put my air cleaner lids on. I got to put the parking brake handle back together. But basically, we're at the point where I'm just kind of waiting on parts. So my front rotor should be here later today. Then we'll go and we'll get all the rotors drilled. After that, we can get the wheels and tires on. And then we're pretty much just, you know, nitpicking and wrapping this thing up. All right, folks, it is officially Monday, week of the show. We're leaving Thursday morning, and I'm starting to get anxious. So we still don't have our rotors. We still don't have our front spindles. They're both supposed to be here for today. They are out for delivery. So hopefully we get that stuff in today and we can wrap this thing up. But I did get the rear rotors drilled already, so we're gonna get the rear end totally buttoned up and on the ground today. Hopefully by then, the spindles and the rotors will be here. We can drill the front rotors, and then we can get the front end wrapped up. All right, well, we got the rear suspension all finished up. Wheels and tires are on. It's about as low as it can feasibly go on this size tire. I'd like for it to be a little bit lower, but we'll save that for, you know, for another day. So we're pretty much just waiting on the mailman to get here now, then we can wrap the front up. All right, so it is Tuesday, and we are rapidly approaching our exit for the weekend. Almost wrapped up on this thing. Last night I burned some late night oil. I got the spindles built out and put on. I went to go put the brakes on and realized that I was missing yet another little piece. So I did not have the correct spindle nuts for our link pin drop spindles. I only had the smaller later style. Luckily, I live in a world where I still have good friends that live not that far away that still have junk cars in their backyard that they're willing to, you know, let me rob parts off of. So shout out to Alex for absolutely coming in, you know, when I needed some parts for this thing. Otherwise, I don't think it would have gotten finished. But we've got our spindle nuts on, so I'm gonna get the spindle nuts on, dust caps, wheels, and then all we've really gotta do is bleed the brakes, do a quick little alignment on this thing, and we'll be ready for a test drive. So it's been a heck of an afternoon. I've been frantically working on this thing. Hadn't really filmed a whole lot just because I've been jamming on it. But I think we're pretty much wrapped up. We got all the brakes bled out and assembled. Got the wheels and tires on. Got the ride height all adjusted and fine-tuned right where I want it. Just took it on a short little test drive. We need to do a little clutch adjustment in the morning. But other than that, tomorrow we'll get this thing scrubbed up. We'll get all the greasy fingerprints scrubbed out of it. And we'll get it loaded up on the trailer and we'll be ready to head to Helen first thing Thursday. And just for some scale reference, I'm not the tallest guy in the world. But if you gotta bend over to get the door handle, it's pretty low. So, thanks for watching on my frantic car show prep on this thing. If you haven't subscribed and you're into the Type 34, make sure you click that button. I'm gonna have a bunch more work coming up on this thing in the future. We're gonna fully restore this car eventually. So I've got all the sheet metal. We're gonna start really digging into this thing here in the next few months. So please stick around. If you see me and Helen, come and tell me how rusty this piece of junk is. I'll see you guys later.